clusters explodes the versions. And the number of clusters who are falling off the supported curve and are going into unsupported versions because they're not at this kind of practice. So that one of, like, how do I maintain these things is a really, I think a key one. Another thing that I suppose I would be investigating is a bit more into, like, mixing serverless and things more into your clusters. So this idea of different workloads can work differently. And I think personally, just a personal opinion, I think a lot of people will end up with Kubernetes plus serverless containers as their eventual solution to get away from a lot of the management headaches and a lot of the problems that underlie kind of like maintaining, again, this maintenance problem and trying to get down the amount of time you have to spend on maintenance. It has its own sets of problems, but I just have this feeling that the happy place will end up being there. So if I was, I had clusters and I was thinking what I want to do this year, I'd be investigating serverless containers if I hadn't already. So I think that's kind of an interesting area.
Yeah, it's we talk about businesses, needing applications and delivering of applications from an application delivery perspective. You bring up the topic of just because you think you need to run it on Kubernetes or on this particular piece of infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean it has to. I mean, there's even a question in the chat, and the question is from I believe it's Vivek. If I'm mispronouncing it, I apologize. For a front end app using React, do we use a container or a CDN? Now, I don't think there's a perfect answer for this. I don't think you're going to be able to be like, you should use X or you should use Y. But I think what's interesting, and we'll talk about this a little bit, I'm curious your opinion. I've always been a fan of run the application where it makes the most sense for your business, for the requirements, for the security, right? For the touch. Like there's just obviously the, data resiliency. There's lots of things that go into it. But that being said, just because you're running or creating an application, it doesn't necessarily have to be a container, or maybe it is serverless, or maybe it's a function, or maybe it's, those types of things. So what are some ways that not only the audience, but just in general, we in this space, what are some steps we can take to get to the right answer or to the closest to the correct or right answer for our organization?
I think you end up having to look at the trade-offs you're going to make, and there are quite a few of them. So, I mean, the advantage of containers, and this is the big promise, is you can run the app in test and dev and CI all the same way. Serverless, that's trickier, but serverless has huge advantages for bursty applications. I want to do, suddenly I need to do 1,000 requests where previously it's running quite slow. And that's the kind of thing where you start thinking of it's to do with, the style of application. What sort of coding are you using? Is it greenfield? Or are you legacy? Are you porting a legacy app? In which case, containers or VMs is probably going to be your answer because the app won't take being put to server. That's why I always think with serverless is like where serverless has its place, I could never see it replacing containers or VMs until everyone gets rid of legacy. And I love to be in that day when all the legacy IT goes, but I don't think I'll see that one ever.
No.
So,
yeah. I don't think legacy is going anywhere. It would be nice. It would be really awesome. But there's a reason mainframes and AS400s and all of these things are still sitting in data centers. And hey, it is what it is, right? We have to. I think that's the key, right? We're still trying to solve business problems, deliver value to the business. But at the end of the day, just because we need it to run in Kubernetes doesn't mean it needs to run in Kubernetes. Right. No. And I actually put that in one of my, I wrote a predictions blog a couple of weeks ago. And in that, I actually talked about, we have made our lives so complex just because of our opinions or our technical choices, which has nothing to do with what we're actually trying to do, which is deliver applications.
Yeah. The complexity point you make is really, really good. And it's the one that always worries me because even Kubernetes, and the important thing to know about it is it's not a full solution. It's by design. They say certain parts of this stack are not our concern. You need to go and get additional things. So you're going to need CNI. You're going to need storage. You're going to need networking. You're going to need authentication solutions. You're going to need admission control. There's just a whole stack of additional. And I look at that and go, that's horribly complicated for a new company. And that's comes back to this point of probably don't want to start with Kubernetes unless you kind of have to. Start with some way of running containers, a serverless container solution that'll let you scale. It doesn't have all the additional complexity. So that the complexity one, probably the bit that would worry me the most about how people are doing containers is I've been doing this for, I said, 8-9 years now, containers. I still learn things every week. You will never stop.
Well, it's interesting. You didn't even mention observability and monitoring and
Yeah.
traces and all of that fun stuff. There really is, right? I've had a in-depth view of the service mesh world for years now. Obviously, observability and the different components and pieces. Complexity is not necessarily a bad thing, and I want to be careful with that. Actually, as I reread my predictions blog after it got posted, I was like, wait, some folks might actually see that I was negative in some way towards containers or Kubernetes or in that sense. But at the end of the day, delivering value to the business and helping reduce that complexity, however you choose to solve it, is always the right answer for the organization. And obviously, we have opinions, and there's going to be trade-offs, and we've been doing this for a long time, and so it's definitely fun to see kind of the maturity. But really, that is kind of that next step in the for the seasoned veteran, is how to maybe reduce some of those complexities and make their lives a little bit easier. You mentioned something, and I want to go back to this because you actually said containers or the ecosystem, whether it's Kubernetes or serverless or all of the necessary components in and around containers, it moves so fast. What are some practical ways that you have found to stay on top of the very fast, moving, I would call it a large ship at this point.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kubernetes joke in there. But how do you handle that? What are some tips and tricks for it moving so fast and staying on top of it?
I guess it depends on like how focused you are on it. If you're super focused on it, weirdly, one of the best ways is actually participating in the project. So if you actually, there are Slacks for Kubernetes, and you can join SIGs. So if you're like interested in area of Kubernetes, one of the best ways to actually find it, I found so much information I wouldn't find otherwise by being in the right channel on the Kubernetes Slack. And there's some really great people there who are very helpful. That's a good one. Social media is a perennial favorite, whichever social media platform you're on these days, and there are, there's people on different ones. But places like LinkedIn, Twitter, Mastodon started to become more popular, I found, in certain tech niches. The challenge there is now you've got like 3 to 4 different social networks to hang out on. And even places like Reddit as well. Reddit's a great, there's lots of good information. If you find the right subreddit, there's good info. So it is kind of this journey where you're just like sucking in information, and then it's like, where do I focus? Because you can't cover it all. And then just like trying to nail in. The other one, if you get super deep with Kubernetes, especially, and Docker as well, is you will find GitHub is weirdly the best, sometimes the only place to find your answer. I have on multiple occasions now spent some hours in either GitHub issues or the code itself, spelunking around trying to find what I want. So that's generally, if you really want to know the depths, that's probably where you have to hang out, is GitHub, and actually start looking at PRs and issues, which you have to be kind of like either very interested or really needing that information though.
Speaking of social media, this would be a good opportunity to plug what's your Twitter handle, if you don't mind, and Mastodon.
Right, my Twitter handle, and generally my handle on most is the same thing. It's Racine, which is Raesene, for a very geeky reason, which is basically when I started getting into kind of like the internet. It was a handle of a game I was playing. It was a name in a game, and it was the one thing I could find that no one had taken. So you could go to any given website and have that name, and that's lasted me like for the last 20 years. So it's been it's worked out pretty well.
You don't have a very common name, I would say, in the tech space. Neither do I, by chance. Maybe because of our lineage and heritage, and where we come from. My handles are not as cool as yours. I chose my handle because there was a photographer who beat me to it at one point in time. He had at Sean O'Dell, so I am the Sean O'Dell. That was long before anybody had a D before, so I like to consider myself, I was cool in that sense. But that mine does also stretch across Mastodon, GitHub, LinkedIn, all of the necessary mediums and platforms. So definitely, Rory is a great follow. I'm kind of a terrible follow at times because I like to delve into other things that have nothing to do with technology. But you should follow anyway. It's always kind of fun. All right, let's get back to the topic at hand. What are some of the challenges? And this is so broad. So I almost wanted to narrow this down because even in the chat, some of the folks are actually already articulating some of the challenges that they are saying. But what are some of the let's start with two top challenges that still remain with containers and containerization. And then how do you think they will be solved or overcome? So let's just start with one. Let's talk about the first one. We'll discuss it, and then we'll shift to the second one.
So, I mean, I think, to be honest with you, we've already covered, I think we've touched on these, because I think that these go all the way through it. The one that I probably find the hardest, or the one that's the biggest challenge is complexity, is that we're building every month that goes by, we add a new thing that comes in and it's more complexity. And I think that there's going to have to be a point where companies, they rationalize and say, actually, do I need this 20 cert? I mean, and you said before, it's like, if it's bringing business value to the business, great. But is there some of that complexity that maybe isn't bringing value to the business, or maybe it could be done in a more simple way? That, for my money, is how what I'd be thinking about, because I just look at some of the stacks now and go, how does anyone, get their head around, get that into their head, and understand what's going on?
They have a massive team attempting to solve the infrastructure operational platform challenges instead of focusing on their core business value, which is delivering applications, right? I know that one gets on some people when you start to talk about that. Like we might have overdone some of this in a lot of ways. And we talk about challenges. I think that's actually true. You mentioned whether it's complexity, right? We've talked a little bit about security. We're not going to dive too far down into that one, but security comes up in every conversation every day. There are so many different surface, attack points. There are new, whether it's, benchmarks or new findings or new this, right? And it moves fast. So if let's talk a little bit about security. We'll actually look at this a little bit in the follow-up question as well. But just what are some things that if you were to look at the security challenges of containers today, can you rattle off a few of those that you think might be super valid and important? You don't have to go too far in the weeds, but just kind of at the surface. What are some of those challenges that you see?
The first one that is a kind of a everything's exposed on the internet is the kind of way I would put it to begin with. So we've gone from this world where things were not directly exposed. And the problem with everything exposed on the internet, Kubernetes is a good example. So there are around 900,000 Kubernetes hosts directly connected to the internet. And that means that one mistake in your authentication, one mistake or one bug in Kubernetes, right, is a software, everything is CVE, some bugs, that will get you into trouble. And that we've gone from this very hyper-connected world. And quite timely at the moment, you've seen companies essentially like losing staff, and they've been revoking their access, thinking, well, all your clusters are right there on the internet, so how careful are you being? So there's lots of different threats, and we've seen a lot of attackers doing things like compromising developer laptops as a way, and again, all your stuff's straight on the internet. So before, you could maybe cut off all their access by getting rid of a VPN, right? That was the old way it used to work. Everything went through the VPN. Now you can't do that anymore. If someone compromises one of your developers' laptops, you're going to have to scramble across how many systems? Do you even know where they are? Yep. You mentioned observability. Do you even know every service that your people have got access to, though, so that when that happens, you can react quickly? So that part of a combination of exposure plus attackers is big. The other one, which obviously is getting a lot of press, and rightly so at the moment, is supply chain, which it's another complexity problem, because we've got all these applications that have hundreds of libraries, as sitting underneath the actual code you've written. And now it turns out that attackers have worked that out. Weirdly, I always think of security people, you're act like Cassandra, right? You make prophecies that no one will believe. And I actually did a talk in 2015 about this exact problem, about supply chain security, and about what happens if an attacker takes out one library that you use, and how there's really no great solution. Luckily, there are people working on that now, and it's getting better. But still, that's the one that, do you know about every application library that's written? Do you know who wrote it? You probably don't know who wrote it. Do you know what their situation is, who they work for, what their background is, how secure are they? No, you don't know that either. You don't probably know who they are, even if you know all of the versions you've got. So it's that kind of, that's another complexity problem, right? But those are the two ones I think that really I think about a lot when we're looking at this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, Cloudsmith, from our perspective, this is the question we get asked on a hour to hour basis, talking with customers and prospective customers and prospects and all of that. Look, supply chain is like in some ways we solve some complexity challenges with CI/CD and continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous testing, and building run books, and we actually solved a lot of the complexity by automation. But when you inject, as you said, one compromised library,
Yeah.
that entire process and pipeline and supply chain is now compromised. And the challenge I see is nobody has a clue where it is, right? Where did this happen? Why did this happen?
Hmm.
What systems are affected, right? How many containers do I have running out there that are now compromised because of this? And so this is probably, I don't want to go too far in this. We could sit here and talk for hours about this specific subject. In our follow up to this, we will actually dive deep and actually drill into some of those challenges, and talk about a lot of the intricacies. We haven't even mentioned SBOM yet, right? No. We've actually mentioned the concept. We haven't talked about or the components of an SBOM, but we haven't actually talked about it in general, right? So it's interesting how all of this goes back to just kind of a new introduction of technology in this containers. We've solved a problem here. Then we introduced a little bit more complexity. Then we solved another problem here, right? And it's just this continual, process that we're on, which I think is a good thing. But at the same time, it can also be a struggle and a bad thing. So, any final comments on the topic around, container security, the problems that we're trying to solve, and obviously supply chain attacks that you mentioned?
I think yeah, we're right. We have got supply chain problems right now. It's good to see, and I'll mention the OpenSSF. If people haven't looked into OpenSSF, good foundation. They're doing a lot of great work on trying to address this problem. It's not a quick fix. This is the thing that I think is the big challenge with supply chain, is no one can tell you, just do this and you fixed it.
Yep.
They can help. They can provide you with tools. They can provide you with advice, but they cannot fix it quickly. It's going to be a problem for forever. And again, I actually would bring it back to the message I had before about complexity and trying to reduce complexity. I try to think of library dependencies as being kind of it's like nuclear power, right? It's great, you use them, they get you there faster, they do something for you, but then you have to manage the radioactive waste. And that's all the maintenance you have to do on all of these libraries. So every time you add another library to a project, think about that's the more radioactive waste I then have to manage. It's a cost. And it's that hopefully that might, I think for me, one of the best things you can do to help your supply chain security is say, do I need 500 libraries here? Can I maybe get that down by 100? If I have, then fantastic. I've just made my life easier. I will not have that report that says, hey, you got these many vulnerabilities. It'll be somewhat smaller. It's all about that journey to try and reduce your complexity again.
Yeah, limiting the attack surface is the biggest challenge in that sense. So to close things out, right? We have, we've talked a lot about containers, Kubernetes, obviously exploring serverless containers and really just in general about application delivery and the challenges in and around the space. So as you, kind of last question, I'll give you an opportunity to kind of open this up and just, talk about your remainder for 2023. What are some things that you're going to be focusing on in and around this space that maybe we've talked about, but if you could detail maybe where you are looking to focus or maybe some of the things that you're hoping we solve in and around this ecosystem based upon these challenges we've discussed?
Yeah, I think in terms of the focus I'm going to have, it's going to be it's going to be around maintaining the complexity of Kubernetes. One of the things I'm actually interested in doing, I talked about fundamentals, is I actually started doing some posts around fundamentals. So trying to do some stuff around here's containers and here's how they work. Because I think the best thing I ever did when I learned containers was went down to the basics and worked my way up. Because now when I get a new thing, it's just like a little bit extra and I kind of have this base to sit on. So if I was advising people, that's the thing to do is to work from that base and work your way up. Know what's going on underneath the covers. In terms of stuff, that will be one for me, is trying to explain more to people about that. I think the other thing is just trying to keep up with Kubernetes. There's a new, so the way Kubernetes does admission control, there's a new inbuilt version of that coming along, which is going into alpha in the next release. So it's going to be that constant process of what's coming with Kubernetes now and can you keep up? along with keeping up with all the other things I think we've been doing.
Yeah, there's just so much to do in finding that focus. And I think you actually said it a couple times, is nobody can solve every problem, right? There are a variety of challenges. Some of them take very specific focus and niche. I laugh back in the day, when we started getting into traditional monitoring tools, and that the Microsoft, the Microsoft's mom, and just kind of the build out of all of those tool sets. There was always this idea of having a single pane of glass, and I've never prescribed to that. I do not believe in that. It's nearly impossible. And so as we go into 2023, I look forward to every organization, every open source project, whether commercial organizations, right, governing bodies or SIGs, obviously, CIS, and really just everybody in this ecosystem is solving what they know best, and focusing on that. Obviously, some folks are far better at different areas than others. Different individuals have different, all of us have different expertise and different focus. And so to me, that's going to be the biggest thing for 2023, is not trying to solve every problem, but trying to solve each of the little, kind of here and there. And as we solve each of those smaller problems or chunks, right, it's going to take a big, effort by a lot of different folks to do it. But I think we can get better than where we are today. And so that will definitely help out in this idea in an area around containerization. So really, really excited really for what is happening in this space, and really want to thank you for the time coming in and talking. And as I close out today, I want to bring up a few things, especially for you, Rory, because we have KubeCon coming up in April. So if you don't mind, kind of tell us about what you're going to be doing at KubeCon, any sessions you might have a part of, or any of the SIGs and the different things that you will be taking part in.
So the main thing, I will be doing a talk at KubeCon with a SIG honk. So it's myself, Brad Giesemann, Ian Coldwater, and Duffy Cooley. And we're going to be talking about container vulnerability scanners and how potentially it's called malicious compliance, our talk. And it's about how could clever people try and get past all those nice controls that we put in place around container vulnerability scanners and controls. So it should be interesting. I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I am as well. And obviously you mentioned some fantastic folks besides yourself on that team. I had the privilege of working with Duffy at VMware. Fantastic. And obviously Ian, well-known, well-respected. And if you ever see Ian, obviously honk is very, very important to them. And so definitely bring that up. A couple other things, from a Cloudsmith perspective, we obviously are super excited and thankful to have all of you here today. Some of the things we are going to be doing, we will be at KubeCon as well. I will be there. I'm looking forward to that. We as an organization have updated our Terraform provider, so you could manage Cloudsmith with Terraform. And then a fun one is, as we continue to add and expand into upstreams, which is something that we're looking to do. We've added NPM and Python from an upstream perspective. They're both in early access. And, as of now, we support 28 different packages, and we're going to continue to expand that and obviously offer upstreams in that. And so it really excited, our customers are loving that. Really, it's becoming a common theme. Hey, we need upstreams, we need X, right? And so it's good to hear. And then the other thing is, not only will we be at KubeCon, we will be at the London Tech Show next week. And then I will be in lovely New York City the week after. But the other thing that we want to announce today, and actually I'm going to hold on. Let me do the winners first, and then I've got one more big announcement. So our winners for today is Jonathan Burlback. He is getting a prize pack. Congratulations to Jonathan. That looks like Swin, or I'm going to say Swin. I'm going to totally butcher that name. Abigbite, a prize pack as well. And then Wiley Lang, prize pack, and Matthew Greiner, a free lunch. And Hillary will be reaching out to all of you for that. But the big announcement is this. We are announcing Unpacked. Unpacked as a conference that we are excited about, that Cloudsmith is putting on, focused on DevOps, package management, supply chain security, and this will be virtual. And we're going to be having this in a couple of months. So if you go to unpackedconference.com, we would love to have you sign up. Go check it out. We haven't announced the full speaker list yet, but we're going to be getting there. I'm excited about that as well. And so with that in mind, Rory, I just want to say thank you. You've been a fantastic guest. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and have you provide your expertise today.
Great stuff. Thanks very much for having me along.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day, wherever you are, morning, afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers.
Cheers all.